The old problem. What is German? Let us count up apart the real acquisitions of philosophical thought, for which we have to thank German intellects. Are they in any allowable sense to be counted also to the credit of the whole race? Can we say that they are at the same time the work of the German soul, or at least a symptom of it, in the sense in which we are accustomed to think, for example, of Plato's idiomania, his almost religious madness for form as an event and an evidence of the Greek soul? Or would the reverse perhaps be true? Were they individually as much exceptions to the spirit of the race as was, for example, Goethe's paganism with a good conscience, or as Bismarck's Machiavellism was with a good conscience, his so-called practical politics in Germany? Did our philosophers perhaps even go counter to the need of the German soul? In short, were the German philosophers really philosophical Germans? I call to mind 3 cases. Firstly, Leibniz's incomparable insight with which he obtained the advantage not only over Descartes but over all who had philosophized up to his time that consciousness is only an accident of mental representation and not its necessary and essential attribute, that consequently what we call consciousness only constitutes a state of our spiritual and psychical world, perhaps a morbid state, and is far from being that world itself. Is there anything German in this thought, the profundity of which has not as yet been exhausted? Is there reason to think that a person of the Latin race would not readily have stumbled on this reversal of the apparent? For it is a reversal. Let us call to mind, secondly, the immense note of interrogation which Kant wrote after the notion of causality. Not that he at all doubted its legitimacy like Hume. On the contrary, he began cautiously to define the domain within which this notion has significance generally. We have not even yet got finished with the marking out of these limits. Let us take thirdly the astonishing hit of Hegel, who stuck at no logical usage or fastidiousness when he ventured to teach that the conceptions of kinds develop out of one another, with which theory the thinkers in Europe were prepared for the last great scientific movement, for Darwinism. For without Hegel there would have been no Darwin. Is there anything German in this Hegelian innovation which first introduced the decisive conception of evolution into science? Yes, without doubt we feel that there is something of ourselves discovered and divined in all 3 cases. We are thankful for it, and at the same time surprised. Each of these 3 principles is a thoughtful piece of German self-confession, self-understanding, and self-knowledge. We feel with Leibniz that our inner world is far richer, ampler, and more concealed. As Germans, we are doubtful, like Kant, about the ultimate validity of scientific knowledge of nature, and in general about whatever can be known causality. The knowable as such now appears to us of less worth. We Germans should still have been Hegelians, even though there ever been a Hegel, inasmuch as we, in contradistinction to all Latin peoples, instinctively attribute to becoming to evolution a profounder significance and higher value than to that which is. We hardly believe at all in the validity of the concept being. This is all the more the case because we are not inclined to concede to our human logic that it is logic in itself, that it is the only kind of logic. We should rather like, on the contrary, to convince ourselves that it is only a special case and perhaps one of the strangest and most stupid. A 4th question would be whether also Schopenhauer, with his pessimism, that is to say, the problem of the worth of his existence, had to be a German. I think not. The event after which this problem was to be expected with certainty, so that an astronomer of the soul could have calculated the day and the hour for it. Namely, the decay of the belief in the Christian God, the victory of scientific atheism, is a universal European event in which all races are to have their share of service and honor. On the contrary, it has to be ascribed precisely to the Germans, those with whom Schopenhauer was contemporary, that they delayed this victory of atheism longest and endangered it most. Hegel especially was its retarder par excellence, in virtue of the grandiose attempt we made to persuade us at the very last of the divinity of existence with the help of our 6th sense, the historical sense. As philosopher, Schopenhauer was the first avowed and inflexible atheist we Germans have had. His hostility to Hegel had here its motive. The non-divinity of existence was regarded by him as something understood, palpable, indisputable. He always lost his philosophical composure and got into a passion when he saw anyone hesitate and beat about the bush here. It is at this point that his thorough uprightness of character comes in. Unconditional, honest atheism is precisely the preliminary condition for his raising the problem as a final and hard-won victory of the European conscience as the most prolific act of 2,000 years discipline to truth, which in the end no longer tolerates the lie of the belief in a God. One sees what is really gained, the victory over the Christian God, Christian morality itself, the conception of veracity taken ever more strictly, the confessional subtlety of the Christian conscience, translated and sublimated to the scientific conscience, to intellectual purity at any price, to look upon nature as if it were a proof of the goodness and care of a God, to interpret history in honor of a divine reason as a constant testimony to a moral order in the world and a moral final purpose, to explain personal experiences as pious men have long enough explained them, as if everything were a dispensation or intimation of providence, something planned and sent on behalf of the salvation of the soul. All that is now past, it is conscience against it. It is regarded by all the more acute consciences as disreputable and dishonorable as mendaciousness, feminism, weakness and cowardice. By virtue of this severity, if by anything we are good Europeans, the heirs of Europe's longest and bravest self-conquest, when we thus reject the Christian interpretation and condemn its significance as a forgery, we are immediately confronted in a striking manner with the Schopenhauerian question: has existence then a significance at all? The question which will require a couple of centuries even to be completely heard in all its profundity. Schopenhauer's own answer to this question was, if I may be forgiven for saying so, a premature juvenile reply, a mere compromise, a stop page, and sticking in the very same Christian ascetic moral perspectives, the belief in which had got noticed to quit along with the belief in God. But he raised the question as a good European, as we have said, and not as a German. Or did the Germans prove, at least by the way in which they seized on the Schopenhauerian question, their inner connection, a relationship to him, their preparation for his problem and their need of it? That there has been thinking and printing even in Germany since Schopenhauer's time on the problem raised by him, it was late enough, does not at all suffice to enable us to decide in favor of this closer relationship. One could, on the contrary, lay great stress on the peculiar awkwardness of this post-Schopenhauerian pessimism. Germans evidently do not behave themselves here as in their element. I do not at all allude here to Eduard von Hartmann. On the contrary, my old suspicion is not vanished even at the present that he is too clever for us. I mean to say that as a rant broke from the very first, he did not perhaps make merry solely over German pessimism, and that in the end he might probably bequeath to them the truth as to how far a person could bamboozle the Germans themselves in the age of bubble companies. But further, are we perhaps to reckon to the honor of Germans the old humming top Bonson, who all his life spun about with the greatest pleasure around as realistically dialectic misery and personal ill luck? Was that German? In passing, I recommend his writings for the purpose for which I myself have used them, as anti-pessimistic fare, especially on account of his elegantius psychologica, which it seems to me could alleviate even the most constipated body and soul. Or would it be proper to count such dilettanti and old maids as the markish apostle of virginity may lend among the genuine Germans? After all, he was probably a Jew. All Jews become markish when they moralize. Neither Bonson nor Mainlander nor even Eduard von Hartmann give us a reliable grasp of the question whether the pessimism of Schopenhauer is frightened glance into an undiversified world which has become stupid, blind, deranged and problematic. His honorable fight was not only an exceptional case among Germans, but a German event, while everything else which stands in the foreground like a violent politics and a dreadful jingoism which decidedly enough regards everything with reference to a principle sufficiently unphilosophical, consequently subspecies speciate, namely the German species, testifies very clearly to the contrary. No, the Germans of today are not pessimists, and Schopenhauer was a pessimist. I repeat it once more, as a good European and not